I found a source that has not ever been used before. Why Joseph Smith would have refused the liquor is something of a mystery.
Don Bradley is
What I would call a Joseph Smithologist. An ex-Mormon atheist for a time, found my way back. Joseph Smith's childhood leg surgery has significance not only for understanding the word of wisdom, it has significance for understanding Joseph Smith himself. There's deeper context here.
And we think, oh, he refuses alcohol. Oh, word of wisdom. The word of wisdom didn't even exist yet.
This discovery about his childhood leg surgery that I'm going to share with you today.
This is the most foundational of all of the insights that you have found.
Joseph says then that the pain shoots like lightning into his leg. Oh, Father, the pain is so severe, how can I bear it? And to get very personal, I guess, Joseph Smith Sr. was watching his 7-year-old son die. I have an older son, Donnie, who is my namesake. Right? Like Joseph Jr. was Joseph Sr.'s namesake. Donnie will get to fulfill his potential. I will see Donnie again. So what am I getting at? I've been building to something. What am I building to? If Joseph Smith Jr. refused the alcohol, what would make sense of this is I had an amazing mother, Patricia Bradley, and she, when I was little, she just asked questions to me a lot. She just really stoked my curiosity. She got me to ask the question, why? You know, why, look at that bee on the flower over there. What, you know, why do you think he's doing that? You know, and every child is curious, but she just really, sometimes that curiosity gets killed. Sometimes it gets stoked. You know, mine got stoked by my mother. And so growing up, I was a science kid, and it was when I was a teenager, late teen years, I started to get into history. And I really got into history, right? Like church history.
Yeah.
And that grew out of being really devout. I had a kind of spiritual awakening when I was 15, where I realized that, like, you know, whatever else I could do in my life, if there's eternity, then eternity is going to outweigh, you know, there's a passage in, I think, 2 Corinthians where Paul says something like, you know, don't fix your eyes on the things that you can see, but on the things that you can't see, because the things that you can see are temporal, temporary. The things that you can't see are eternal. And so that led to me really delving into the scriptures, delving in religiously. And then because history is such an important part of the restoration, and Joseph Smith is such a crucial figure in bringing forth the scriptures of the restoration, I wanted to know more about him because, you know, the history of the restoration was sacred history, right? So I wanted to understand, and I thought, well, if Joseph Smith, you know, like Isaiah, you know, most authors in the Bible receive this much revelation or whatever. Isaiah is maybe this much, and Moses is like this much, you know, attributed to him, like the 5 books. Oh, Joseph Smith, and it was like this giant stack, you know? And so if I wanted to understand more about receiving personal revelation, well, like, what did this guy do? This guy knew what he was doing. What did he do? And so I really delved into Joseph Smith. And like you said, I as you suggested, I just wanted to know what happened. I mean, that's just a consistent theme always, is I just wanted to know what happened, you know? And so that was where I got my start in doing Mormon history.
So this is a passion for you. This is a big, I can feel it even when you say it now. I mean, I can feel it, right? So do you remember, was there a moment that you were like, yeah, that's the one I want to go deep on? Like where was the catalyst of that time?
I mean, some of my early things were sort of crazy doctrinal
the things he was
rumors doing. Or oh, well, not all just Joseph Smith. I mean, I heard people talked about wild things, Adam God theory or whatever. I'm like, what's this? Where did this come from?
Curiosity.
You know? And so I knew that there was a connection between where a doctrine came from and how authoritative it was. And so I wanted to see, like, you know, did this doctrine actually trace back to a revelation to Joseph Smith, or did this idea just come along later, you know, and so on. And so that was kind of like an initial prompt for me in some of the research.
So you wanted to get this deeper. When did things change then? So because you at one point you found yourself outside of the church. You removed even removed your records from the church.
It was a really gradual process, you know. So I started this research when I was 17, going to the church archives when I was 17, right? And then in my 20s, I majored in history. I was doing lots of research. I was finding new things. And something that happens when you are doing your own research as opposed to when you're reading what someone else has written and published is that you have to digest, make sense of, integrate everything yourself. Whereas if you're reading somebody else's book, they've already done it. They've already integrated everything intellectually. And if it's a spiritual topic, maybe they've integrated it spiritually as well. If you're doing your own research, drawing your own conclusions, the burden of both of those things fall squarely on you, right? So I was having to make sense of things intellectually, which, at least to a good extent, I was, right? I was making new discoveries, right? Spiritually, part of the problem was intellectual as well, because Joseph Smith quoted this proverb, "A little knowledge is a dangerous thing." So I was making new discoveries, but making new discoveries didn't mean I had the giant picture. If there's some new giant picture that these new little discoveries fit in, I didn't have it, right? So what happened is that the things that I was finding in my research increasingly diverged from the story of the Restoration as I had been taught it. Right?
It didn't line up. And so the more that happened, the more there was dissonance. At first, that didn't bother me. It was just like interesting, exciting. Well, maybe here's how things fit together or whatever. With time, there was more and more of a divergence, more and more of a dissonance. And I wasn't relying on maybe sometimes certain spiritual sources of knowledge and understanding as much as I could also, right? And so when it comes to, certain areas like history, I mean, you make sense of them through the tools of history. If you're doing mathematics, you use the tools of mathematics, right? Yeah. If you're doing chemistry, you use experiments and so on. If you're doing history, you use the tools of history. But if you're dealing with spiritual things, you also use spiritual methods of understanding, right? Applying things, judging them by their fruits, and so on. And some of that balance got really off for me. That was one issue, right? But I was very much trying to find the truth, no question about it, right? I when it came to the history of the church, I just wanted to know what happened. But my sense of what that was increasingly was different from the story I'd been told. That bothered me. And eventually I went through a sort of implosion of my faith where certain things, there were actually sources that I was relying on that turned out to not be legitimate sources that I had used to kind of prop up my faith, right? And like
so,
what? Like what?
Well, there are a couple, they're not well known, but they were known to me from my research. So one of them is a journal that is ostensibly the journal of Sarah Stoddard from Nauvoo, and it describes some miraculous events that Joseph Smith was involved in.
So this is the depth of it, right?
And I was like, wow, look at the miracle here, and this is documented in this journal. And then later, as I delved into it more, I discovered that what it appeared had happened was that a woman had remembered as a child a family story about this miraculous event. It was a family story and that had been passed down. And she thought she was remembering a journal. And so in her old age, she attempted to reconstruct the journal. So no ill intent, best of intentions here. But when I looked at it, I discovered actually this has clear 20th century language in it. It has historical errors. This is not what it purports to be. So I can't rely on this for its report of a miracle. There was another similar sort of source or set of sources that a descendant of Joseph Smith's brother, Samuel Harrison Smith, created, again, with the best of intentions, but it had all kinds of prophecies that were like fulfilled to the letter and so on. And eventually, using my historical methods, I figured out, this was made up later. This is made up in the 20th century. This isn't real, you know? And so, speaking of let's get real, right? Well, it wasn't real, right? And so,
interesting.
I was relying on these sorts of historical sources as a source of my faith understanding, right? And so when those sources collapsed on me, that was part of the collapse also of my faith.
So you have this intricate mind. It's very detailed. It's very sharp. It's very powerful. And it just didn't line up. Some of the things you were discovering didn't line up.
They didn't line up. Yeah.
But it matters to you. I think that's interesting. As I'm even hearing you talk about it, the truth matters. It really is a big deal to you.
Yeah,
with that in mind, why? What is it about Joseph that shifted for you that you were unsatisfied with? What was it?
So one of the things I was doing is I was looking at anything that Joseph Smith would do or say in a kind of micro context, right? So there's an approach to biblical studies that's called historical critical method. And I was using that. But for biblical scholars, they're asking questions like, in what decade was this gospel written? In what decade was Mark, Luke, Matthew, or John written? In what century were these certain parts of the Pentateuch, the books of Moses, written? What century, right? And in what, they're not trying to figure out who the person was, even who wrote these things. And they're not trying to figure out any exact time, and they're not trying to figure out an exact place. They're trying to figure out which kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel or the southern kingdom of Judah, Well, because Joseph Smith was so recent and he lived in a time when people were literate and there was a printing press, and I've met great-great-grandchildren of Joseph Smith. He wasn't that long ago, and so as I was looking, I'm not trying to figure out what century did this happen in. I'm trying to figure out on what day did Joseph Smith dictate this chapter of the Book of Mormon? What day did Joseph Smith receive this revelation? And who was the scribe sitting there with the pen in their hand? Where were they? What was going on around them? What was in the newspaper that day, that they might have read? I mean, what's going on in their community? So bringing it down to micro context, like this moment here, right? Where there's a moment here where you've asked me a question. We're in this particular place at Scripture Central, right? There are different things going on around us. I want to reconstruct the moment, right? So Joseph Smith said, I have a key by which I understand the Scriptures. I ask, what was the question that drew out the answer? So sometimes we have a revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants, and it's the answer to a question, and we don't have the question. Sometimes the question is in the revelation, sometimes it's not. So if you want to figure out the question, you want to figure out the context, you want to figure out who's involved, I was taking it to micro levels. And my idea was basically when I had come to disbelieve, my idea was sort of how did Joseph Smith come up with all of this? If Joseph Smith came up with all this, how did he do it? And what were his motives? What was he trying to do? Why? That question from early childhood stuff. Why? Why?
So now you're outside the church at the time and you're starting to look deeper and you're wanting to know why. And and you're still having this open-mindedness and you're learning more about him. What were some of the discoveries that you were having?
I mean, I discovered some things, mostly that I still need to publish. I discovered, for instance, that there was a correlation between there's a correlation between the restoration of the Aaronic priesthood and what's going on in the unfolding translation work on the Book of Mormon. Mm. And of course, at the time, I didn't see it as translation. So I'd stopped believing. I thought that Joseph Smith was making up the text of the book when he's composing it. And I didn't think he even saw it as translation. But I thought, well, why? What's going on, right? But some of the things that I found, even though my framework was not one of faith, I somewhere along the line, not at this point, the moment that I'm describing when I made this discovery, but later I came to think he was an opportunist. He was a scoundrel. Okay, At this point, I didn't believe, but my view of him wasn't that negative. Okay, and there's this idea that some scholars, particularly ex-Mormon scholars, like the late Grant Palmer, for instance, they argue that the restoration of the Aaronic priesthood never happened. There never was a John the Baptist experience, right? Really? That Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery describe, and they say the experience was made up in 1834. Okay, because of things going on then. Now again, so they're claiming there's a context in which they created this story. Again, I'm all about context, right? Yeah. I'm trying to look at micro context. And when I looked, Oliver Cowdery said that experience happened May 15th, 1829. From everything that I could tell, Oliver Cowdery, absolutely sincere. I like nothing, even though I didn't think that, I came to think later Joseph Smith wasn't sincere. I've always seen, when I look at Oliver Cowdery and details about him, like 100% sincere, right? And he is he's the number two guy, and he's there for, many of the visionary experiences, priesthood restoration experiences, right, reported by Joseph Smith. He's the other witness. He's totally sincere. And so I was certain Oliver Cowdery had had a vision. Oliver reported that their experience happened May 15th, 1829. So I tried to look, where were they in the Book of Mormon, right, as they're translating, right, the text is unfolding at that time. Where were they? And what I came to find is that I could identify where they were based on things that Oliver said. And there were things in the Book of Mormon text that were preparing for this experience, that there was like build up to the experience, providing a kind of focus, even alluding to biblical prophecies that had to do with John the Baptist in 3rd Nephi, right? That then could provide a sort of focus for faith, right? Anticipation of their encountering John the Baptist. And so I when I first found that, I realized that find was in some ways kind of faith promoting, even though I did not believe at the time, right? Now later, as I went on, I was continuing to find sort of connections, right, between what's going on in Joseph Smith's life, what's going on around him, and the revelations that he's giving, right? But I came to think that his motives were less than sincere. I came to see him as an opportunist. And so my question became, so questions guide, any inquiry that we're doing is always guided by a question.
Yeah, right? Of course.
And so what we tend to see is to some extent guided by the question that we ask, right? And so what I was using a good method in terms of looking at this micro context, getting a really good chronology, looking what's going on right at this moment around Joseph Smith. But I was asking a very singular, slanted sort of question, what was in it for him, right? So anytime he would open his mouth, give a sermon, a prophecy, a revelation, anything, I had this idea that there was his intentions were not good. They were self-serving intentions. And so I was not surprisingly seeing things that would tend to confirm that, you find to some extent what you're looking for.
And so you're looking for ways to prove that you think that he's an opportunist. And you're like, oh, there's another one, perhaps?
I mean, not ways to prove in the sense that like...
Confirm.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to know what happened. This was my working model, was thinking that he was an opportunist. And so I thought that that was the most valuable question, right? If you think that someone is basically self-serving, then
you'll find
asking like what was in it for them like seems like a reasonable question.
That is good. So let's go off of this idea. I think this is important. So
Sure.
you're it's important when you're looking at history, especially with Joseph Smith, we get the scripture, we see this is what happened. But what about the context? What's the question that led to that?
Yeah.
And one of the conversations that we've had lately, I mean, it was just really powerful to me. It just like honestly, just blew my mind. And I never even considered or even thought about it in this way.
Okay.
It was surrounding the word of wisdom. Because I think a lot of people, when they think of, because there's a story that you always hear about Joseph Smith when he's a boy. He was 7 years old at the time. He had the typhoid fever. It like affected his, I think it was first in his shoulder and moves down to his leg. It's very severe. We've heard that story. And we think, oh, he refuses alcohol. Oh, word of wisdom. But see, we don't even think the word of wisdom didn't even exist yet.
Right. Yeah.
And knowing that context, knowing that background makes a big difference, right?
Right.
So I'm curious, you, Don Bradley, you're outside of the church. You're looking at this history. And from what I'm understanding, what you've told me before is this was something that, I remember you told me like this, you said it is foundational. You said this is probably one of the most foundational discoveries that I think that I've had.
Yeah.
And so can you take me back to that time? I can't even remember if you were in the church or out. Take me to that time when you start to consider this thought and to go deeper on that.
Sure. So, this reflects tremendously the subject, of Joseph Smith's leg surgery, which, as you say, I mean, it's thematically related to the word of wisdom, right? Because word of wisdom says no alcohol, no liquor, no wine, right? The young boy Joseph Smith refuses liquor when it's offered to him as an anesthetic for his surgery. But like you said, it's almost 2 decades. Well, it is 2 decades.
Is it?
It's 2 decades before the word of wisdom. Yeah, because the word of wisdom is given in 1833, and Joseph Smith's leg surgery is in 1813 when he's 7.
That would be like if it would happen in 2005. I mean, for us, I'm just saying like that. That's a long time ago if you think, right?
Right. And it's something of a mystery, right? Why Joseph Smith would have refused the liquor, because another thing people may not realize, there was no temperance movement at the time.
And tell me more about that. What does that mean? So
temperance is abstinence from alcohol, right? So the temperance movement really gets going in the U.S. I mean, it starts to build momentum in the 1820s, 1826. Okay? Really gets going in the 1830s and 40s. It actually culminates a long time later in the 1920s when prohibition is achieved, right? It's basically progressive American Christians are able to pass a constitutional amendment forbidding the consumption of alcohol. This is like the triumph of a movement that had started, nearly a century earlier. And that's the temperance movement. So it's familiar to us in our time, even though the temperance movement per se isn't around. Many of its effects are still here. You have people in certain Protestant denominations where their denomination, they don't drink alcohol, or you have lots of advice about, watching the level of your alcohol consumption for people who do drink and so on. These are legacies of the temperance movement. It was a movement that did not exist when Joseph Smith was a young child. Okay, 1813. That's 13 years before the American Temperance Society is organized. It's even longer before the temperance movement really gained steam. In fact, Joseph Smith's childhood surgery, when he refuses the alcohol, comes at the time of highest alcohol consumption per capita in the history of the United States. Okay.
Wait. That's significant, right? Even the way you're emphasizing it. Mm-hmm. Tell me more. There's a reason why you're emphasizing that. Because today, if you think people consume quite a bit of alcohol, you're saying it was even more back then.
It was way more.
Tell me, give us an idea. Like what? Like how much?
It was, I'll share a number a little bit later, but it was about, I think it comes out to about 3 times the average alcohol consumption for an American adult today, the average. And so it wasn't considered a surprise. Like for him to even consider alcohol, it wouldn't have even been a big deal. It was so normal. One neighbor of the Smiths said to an interviewer decades later when he was asked, did the Smith family drink? His answer was, everybody drank in them days. Right? Okay. And there was no temperance movement. Everybody drank, and on average, they drank a lot.
3 times.
They drank a lot. And that is when Joseph Jr., as a boy, refused alcohol.
So he's kind of like, what?
It's a mystery, right? It doesn't fit with the culture of his time. It's like, it's the opposite of what's going on in the culture of his time.
So for us, we hear that and we're thinking, whoa, he drank. Because we're thinking in our perspective, right, of word of wisdom. Back then, it's the complete opposite.
Oh, yeah, it was assumed people were going to drink. Absolutely. And in fact, just to complicate the story a little bit, even Joseph Jr., later in his life, he drank some, right? We know that Joseph Smith Jr. drank some. So why, when he was 7, and this was the only available anesthetic for an extremely painful surgery, why did he refuse the alcohol? So this is like deep context for the word of wisdom, very deep, right? So people are familiar maybe with some of the more immediate context, right? Which we can touch on here.
Let's do it.
So like a lot of times people are familiar with the story of Emma. And by the way, I should mention that like the story that we're going to go in today, as you've alluded to, it interweaves quite a bit. The story of Joseph Smith's leg surgery. Yeah. Interweaves quite a bit with my own faith journey. Really? It's played a substantive and maybe even pivotal role in that journey. Right? And it's very personal to me because of this theme of father-son bonds. That's an intense one for me, right? And so we're gonna go deep today on all different levels, right? Okay. Intellectually, spiritually, emotionally. So a familiar story that people know, and it's by familiar, I'm not suggesting it's not accurate. It's accurate,
of course,
but there's more to it. Okay? So familiar story is people know that the word of wisdom was given in the context of the School of the Prophets, 1833. And the men of the School of the Prophets met in a certain room, a council room, and the story I think Brigham Young tells is that the men of the School of the Prophets, remember, there's no word of wisdom, they were spitting their tobacco all over the place.
Yeah, we've heard this
during the meetings, right? And so spitting it on the floor, and Emma's cleaning it up, okay? And so this is one of the contexts in which the word of wisdom revelation is given, okay? Now, there's deeper context here, going back a little further, months earlier and looking at a broader picture. Why is this a big deal? So Emma has to clean up tobacco stains off the floor. I mean, it's grueling grunge work, unpleasant, okay? But we all do unpleasant things in our lives. Why is that in itself
that's the story you hear?
Deal?
Yeah,
right?
That's the story you hear.
So something people tend to not know is that just 4 months before the word of wisdom is given, or a little less than 4 months before the word of wisdom is given, Emma had had a child, okay? Her first child who survives. This is Joseph Smith III, okay? And she had an extremely difficult labor with Joseph III, so difficult that she nearly died. Mm-hmm. And Joseph Jr. was actually out of state. He was rushing back. He'd gone on a trip to Boston and New York City. He's rushing back to be there in early November 1832 when his child is born, and he misses it, just barely, okay?
He misses the birth.
He misses the birth, and he comes home, and Emma is close to death, okay? And she struggles with her health for months afterwards. She struggles for quite a while. It's in that time that the word of wisdom is given. Okay?
Interesting.
And the word of wisdom promises health in the navel, marrow in the bones, the ability to run and not be weary and walk and not faint. And it promises wisdom and treasures of knowledge. Now, interestingly, the word of wisdom here probably requires, so there's a context where Emma may have wanted to know and needed to know how to become healthier, right? How does she regain her health in this situation? And the word of wisdom would probably have required sacrifices from both Joseph and Emma, right? So Emma is probably already a teetotaler, someone who does not drink alcohol. She is a Methodist before she comes into the church. From the time she's a young girl, she's a Methodist. Methodists were influenced by the temperance movement. They did not drink alcohol, okay? So Emma probably brought that in with her, that she's a non-drinker, okay? Joseph Smith probably drinks moderately during this time. We know he smokes a pipe, as do the other men of the School of the Prophets, right? And they are chewing tobacco, right? So Emma probably drinks hot drinks, okay? Particularly common in the culture in general, but common particularly for women. I mean, at least in the Brigham Young's Utah sermons, he mentions a lot the women drinking tea and so on, right?
In the journals?
The Journal of Discourse.
Okay.
So Emma would have had particular reason to try to get caffeine during this period from coffee and tea. She's exhausted. Her health is poor. She's struggling, and she's taking care of this baby, nursing her baby, right? But of course, trying to get more energy from caffeine, particularly when you're in poor health, is a losing battle because the body habituates to caffeine, right? It doesn't fix the underlying health issues. The body habituates to it, so you need more and more and more. We don't know. Very good chance Emma's essentially addicted to caffeine during this time, right? And so what she's probably trying, probably not working. Word of wisdom comes, and it gives health advice, and it's telling, here's a word of wisdom, a word to the wise. Here are things you can do for your health. The men of the School of the Prophets throw their pipes into the fire. We have that story. Well, maybe you know that they've actually dug out like the ashes that were thrown away from the fireplace, and they found the pipe stems.
They really found it.
They found them. Okay, so this is real.
That's accurate,
right? Like this is accurate. So Joseph and the men are making sacrifices. Emma's probably making sacrifices too for their own benefit, right? Okay, so that's sort of immediate deep context for the word of wisdom. Then we have this like very deep context, right? You go back decades. We've got this story of Joseph Smith's leg surgery. Yeah, go ahead.
What about the Emma with the caffeine? Why do you feel that is significant? Because that is a fact that a lot of people don't know, right? And you think that she has that habit potentially. What was the connection that you have with that in her health in general? Why it would be important to her? What were you saying with that?
Oh, she had a really difficult labor and had not
connected to the labor. Okay.
Yeah, we have accounts that she was struggling with her health for months afterward. This is less than 4 months after that labor, so she would have still been struggling with her health, her energy, and
So it might have been a challenge for her to hear it, is what you're saying, more than it was just, hey, Joseph, we need to clean this stuff up off the ground. This is disgusting. We should consider this. I've even heard
I think there's a more significant context than just Emma's disgusted by having to clean stuff up. I think Joseph is also seeing that Emma's having to do housework and she's unable to. And actually right around this time,
the run and I'll be weary. That's why that you mentioned that, right?
Yeah.
That blessing, that promise meant something to him.
Right.
Let's discover it. Is that what you're saying?
Right. And right around this time, the Smiths had a house girl, just like a servant, in-house helper, right, who would have been very valuable to them. She dies. She dies, and another one that they have gets married and moves out around the time. So
it's way bigger than just, hey, let's clean this up.
Right.
Way deeper.
Right. But Emma still has a child to raise. There are still household chores to be taken care of, right? Joseph is providing for them, running the church. Like everybody's got things they have to do. It's not a cushy existence. I mean, our lives, we still have all those things to do. Work, household work, and so on. But we have it really easy compared to them because we have washing machines and all these things, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't. And so Emma, life still goes on even if you've got terrible health and no energy. And so Joseph is watching Emma struggle day by day. And this is part of the context in which, word of wisdom is given.
That's interesting. Yeah, it would have to be way bigger than just let's clean this stuff up.
Right.
So, is there anything that you found of what questions he was asking, or that's only what you can imply that he asked?
That's one thing that we can infer. There has been some detailed work done on other potential questions and contexts for the immediate context for the word of wisdom, looking at the different audiences who are implied or mentioned in the revelation, like the high council is mentioned as a specific audience. Joseph's dad, Joseph Sr., was on the high council, right, and others. And this is something that I've delved into. That's been so far on the back burner for me that's something I'll have to kind of dig up more. I want to do more specific delving into that, more exegesis, working out the specific meanings in context of the word of wisdom.
So you're finding that there's more to it, and that idea and the ability to go deeper helps you give you more power to what the actual revelation says. Yeah. And how does that make should we go back? Sure. Should we go back to when he was 7, or is there any other context that you think that you hear about that people make assumptions about, that some of what you've studied could help them clearly see it more clearly, more than just, hey, here's this list of all your stuff you can't do,
I mean, I think recognizing that it's not just a set of prohibitions, it's actually more general advice, divine counsel on how to be healthy, right? So you look at if you look at it in the context of Emma, right, and that she's struggling with her health, right, then seeing that the word of wisdom has prohibitions in it, things to not do, right? No tobacco, no wine or strong drink, and so on, right? The hot drinks, right? But it also says, the thing, all the like herbs in their season. The different herbs there doesn't necessarily just mean herbs the way we think of them. It includes that, but it also vegetables, plant foods, right? It encourages us to have that be the primary aspect of our diet over and against meat, right? Which it says eat sparingly and actually even only under certain conditions and so on. So seeing the word of wisdom not just as a set of prohibitions, but as advice for how to live a healthy life.
I think it's important to note here that this idea that understanding that does give power to the actual revelation itself, right? Yeah. Because it's more than just a physical law too, but if you understand the history, it even gives it more punch, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So, and you could say that, and I love what you said even earlier. That's with any detail of history, any detail of Joseph Smith's past. Yeah.
Right.
So take us back there.
Yeah, and I think that has significance for much more than the word of wisdom. Joseph Smith's childhood leg surgery has significance not only for understanding the backdrop of the word of wisdom, it has significance for understanding Joseph Smith himself and the whole restoration. Joseph Smith's leg surgery helps us answer the question, what kind of person was Joseph Smith? And this was something I was very interested in. And I had a working theory on this, right? Which ended up in inadvertent ways being somewhat of a self-reinforcing theory, right? Because I was asking a question that was based on the theory.
Yeah.
Where the question itself, if you pursue that question, you see things through it's certain lenses, right? You know, whatever the lenses are that I'm wearing, right? Those are going to shape what I see. A question is a lens, right? Yeah. My habitual question was, what was in it for? He said this, he gave this revelation, or what was in it for him? So that was going to shape what I saw. Where, you know, if I asked a set of questions, if I asked questions about you, where with everything the Stephen Jones guy does, right? I'm asking the question, what's in it for him? You know, like, why is he really doing this interview? You know, how can this, you know, help him get ahead in life or whatever? If I ask, whatever questions that I ask are going to shape what I see. Right? It's like taking a certain angle of vision on something. If I look at, you know, if I look at these books, these scriptures from this angle, what I'm going to see is just that angle. If I look at them from here, I can't even see what they are. I already know, but I can't. If I didn't know, I can't see. I can't see the title on the side. I can't see the contents. And so if we limit ourselves to just maybe like a particular question, that's going to shape what we see. That happened for me. Later, I was able to broaden the set of questions that I asked, where I was also asking, you know, how might Joseph Smith have been trying to serve other people? How might have been trying to serve God? This was sort of the root of this discovery about his childhood leg surgery that I'm going to share with you today. That was the root of starting to raise the question, like, what else was this guy about? Like, who was he trying to help? You know, what was his relationship with his family and so on? That grew out of this kind of inadvertently. I wasn't looking for those additional questions, but I was trying to figure out what happened, and I stumbled into those questions.
So the lens that people might look at with this, you're saying it's important to consider the word of wisdom lens, because that might be the reason why people don't get this additional insight that you found. Am I understanding that right?
So I'm talking specifically right now about his leg surgery.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When he refuses the alcohol, we're assuming, Joseph Smith, who came with the word of wisdom, he refused it because he doesn't want to have alcohol. But now let's go deeper into what was really going on, and that's what you were really asking.
Right, when we look at the context, right? Yeah. So the setting here, the larger context, okay? So there's a typhoid epidemic, starts, I think, in 1812. It's during the War of 1812, okay? And everybody in the Smith family, everybody in the Joseph Smith Sr., Lucy Mack Smith family gets typhoid.
Everybody?
Okay? All of them, according to Lucy, her memoir. They all get typhoid, okay? Terrible, deadly disease, but they all recover, except the disease is sort of lingering or creating secondary infections in two of the family members, one of Joseph's sisters, who then sort of recovers eventually, and then Joseph Jr. himself, who is at the time 7 years old. Okay, so now it's into 1813, and he is still struggling. As you mentioned earlier, it starts out he's got a shoulder infection. Yeah. Okay, and I might be pointing the wrong shoulder. I know which leg it was, but I actually think it's probably the left shoulder because it's the left leg. But he has this terrible ache in his shoulder. And in fact, Lucy says that one day, out of the blue, Joseph Jr., her 7-year-old son, is sitting in a chair. He suddenly screams. He screams, okay? And Joseph Jr., the child, she says, describes the pain afterward. So So he has enormous swelling, and they actually like lancet to like have a doctor lancet to like get everything out of there. And it's just terribly inflamed, hugely inflamed, infected. Joseph says then that the pain shoots like lightning into his leg, his left leg. Okay. And she says, my poor boy at this was almost in despair, and he cried out, "Oh, Father, the pain is so severe, how can I bear it?" Okay. So here's a 7-year-old in just unbearable pain. Notice, by the way, the relationship with his father, right? That this is the person he's leaning on. Then we'll come back to that. Right? Lucy says that to help him, comfort him, and so he doesn't have to walk or anything, she carries him around for much of the day.
7-year-old.
While she's doing her housework. Now, he's 7.
Pretty.
For her to be able to carry him around all day while she's, one arm, while she's doing her housework and everything, how emaciated does he have to be? Right?
You mean like lost weight?
Yeah.
He's got to be tiny.
He's tiny.
7-year-olds are pretty big.
He's dying. Okay. He's gradually dying from this infection and the weakening from this infection. And Lucy writes again, she says, the pain was so excruciating, he was scarcely able to bear it. They tried all kinds of things, painful treatments and so on. Nothing worked. And eventually, this was going to kill him. Okay? And they knew that. And so there was an obvious solution. Amputate. Okay? Amputate. The Smiths happened providentially to live near Dartmouth College, okay, which had recently established a medical school. It was established by Dr. Nathan Smith, who later went on to found the Yale Medical School. I've been to his grave at the amazing Yale Cemetery. And it has this arch at the front that says, "The dead shall rise." Right?
What?
And there's this giant monument inside to Dr. Nathan Smith, who started the medical school there and at Dartmouth. Okay? He pioneered experimental methods of surgery. And the big method he pioneered was for how to save a limb so you didn't have to amputate. Okay? Because basically that was the go-to. That continued to be the go-to for decades later. The Civil War, right? Somebody's got a terrible infection. What do? They've removed the limb, right?
Wow.
And so this was what was expected. And he suggests that they try this experimental surgery on Joseph Jr. so he doesn't have to go through his whole life with one leg. Right? Okay. And the doctors, Lucy recalls in her memoir, they ask Joseph Jr. to drink brandy. He won't drink brandy, liquor, right? It's strongest alcohol content. Then he refuses. They say, "Will you take some wine?" He refuses that too.
Interesting.
Right? And the doctor, Lucy recalls, tells him, "You must take something or you can never endure the severe operation to which you must be subjected." Okay? Joseph is defiant. He will not take the alcohol. And he says, "But I will tell you what I will do. I will have my father sit on the bed and hold me in his arms, and then I will do whatever is necessary in order to have the bone taken out." Okay. So Joseph Jr. then, on her account, he sends his mother out. He knows his mother's exhausted from carrying him all the time, taking care of him all the time, and worn out, and he's trying to protect her. And he insists that they cannot do the surgery unless she goes out far away from the house. She does. I can't remember. I think she describes maybe how many yards away she goes. Considerable distance. And when they start, you have to understand what they did. They used drills, not the modern drills, old-fashioned hand crank drills. And maybe you can put a picture of one of these up in the
I've seen
the
it.
episode,
it's
okay?
like
He's
very
terrible, like unimaginable,
imagine.
okay? To break the bone, okay? And then they're like sawing, hammering, chiseling on a 7-year-old's tibia, okay, his leg bone, his like shin bone, okay? And they take out 9 large pieces of bone this way, and then with time, 14 more fragments that broke off in the process work their way out, okay?
No anesthesia.
As soon as no anesthesia, okay, by his insistence, no anesthesia except his father holding him, okay? As soon as they at the time that when I figured out about this, I had a 7-year-old son. My younger son, was 7 years old. Nicholas was 7. Okay, and I knew how tenderhearted, innocent and tenderhearted a 7-year-old is. I knew it from immediate experience, and I could imagine all of this, right? And as soon as they started taking the bone out, drilling into his bone, he screamed so loudly that even though Lucy had gone far away from the house, she could still hear him. And as any mother would, she came running back. He made them stop, and he made her leave. And they did the second piece of bone, and he screamed again. And when they got to the third piece of bone, he screamed so loud that she came running back again. And this time they made someone go with her and restrain her so that she would not come back. Okay. And she described when the third piece was taken away, I burst into the room again. And oh my God, what a spectacle for a mother's eye. The wound torn open, the blood still gushing from it, and the bed literally covered with blood. Joseph was pale as a corpse, and large drops of sweat were rolling down his face, while upon every feature was depicted the utmost agony. And he made her leave again. And this was when they restrained her, okay, was after this. So like I said, I know what a 7-year-old is like emotionally, how tender-hearted. And at this time, as you know, I was an ex-Mormon. I was convinced Joseph Smith was a scoundrel, but I wanted to understand him, okay? And there are people who say that the behavior that Lucy describes was sort of what's called like hagiography. It's like it's building him up too much. He couldn't have been this noble at the age of 7. She's making this up or inflating the story. I didn't know, but I was open to her account. I was open, right? And there are reasons why I became completely and absolutely convinced that Lucy's account is accurate.
What was it about that even now as you rethink over it that causes that emotion to come across you so tenderly?
The suffering of an innocent child and just knowing how, like I said, how tenderhearted. I mean, so my own son Nicholas at that time, I just remember how tender he was with us as his parents, like how much he kind of would tell us how much he loved us and try to show how much he loved us, and realizing also that young children at that age, they don't really get that things that they suffer are not their fault, you know?
They think it's their fault.
Yeah. And like for instance, children who go through divorce and so on when they're young, they think it's something they did somehow, right? They and so just the children so innocent have to suffer terrible things like what the boy Joseph Smith went through, it tugged at my heart, and it tugged at my heart even more as a father. It tugged at my father heart, and the story also really involves, the father-son bond, as we'll talk more about, right? That young Joseph had, he refused the anesthetic, but he said I'll be all right if my father will hold me.
So that seems significant to you for a reason.
Yeah. And so, like, that detail that I'll come back to, like, helped convince me. I already thought, I didn't think Lucy's story wasn't basically accurate. I was very open to it, but that really convinced me of the accuracy of it when you put it in context, and it ended up illuminating who Joseph Smith was, right? Like getting at this question, why did he refuse the alcohol, and what does that tell us about him, right? So he didn't refuse the alcohol because there was a word of wisdom at the time. There wasn't a word of wisdom at the time. He didn't refuse the alcohol because there was a major movement in the country telling people not to drink alcohol, because there wasn't. This is the time of highest drinking in U.S. history. Everybody drank. So that wasn't the reason. He didn't refuse the alcohol even because he had some, constitutional, like basic temperamental distaste for alcohol or something. I mean, he drank some later in his life. So what was it? Why when he needed it most, when he actually needed something to dull the pain, why did he refuse it? And so the amount that people drank per adult at that time. So beer in Utah right now, I think, is the stuff people can get outside the liquor store is like 5%, or I think
7% of the liquid is alcohol.
Yeah, and so it's like 1/20th of it is alcohol or whatever, right? So the actual amount of alcohol in the can is tiny, right? They're averaging, an average adult at that time was averaging over 7 gallons of actual alcohol per year is what's estimated by historians now, okay? Right. That's
a lot.
It's fortunate that the word of wisdom did come along, right? And that the temperance movement also did come along, because alcohol is, of course, addictive and harmful, which is a terrible combination for something to be harmful and addictive, both, right? And of course, this would have been the case for members of the Smith family, just like anybody else. The Smiths were as human as anyone, right? And so they wouldn't have been immune to the effects of alcohol, right? So the word of wisdom, later things would have been very good for them as well. So we have this question, right? Why did the boy Joseph Smith refuse alcohol when it's the only available anesthetic, and they're drilling and hacking at his bone? Okay? And the key is that Joseph Smith didn't just refuse the alcohol, right? We don't want to take it out of context, okay? Don't just look at the fact that Joseph Smith refused the alcohol. Look at what he paired that with, right? I won't have the alcohol, but my father, I'll be okay if my father will hold me during the surgery, okay? So he juxtaposed those two things, he linked them, right? I will have my father sit on the bed, he said, and hold me in his arms. So his father, Joseph Smith Sr., and their bond are the key to why Joseph Smith refused alcohol. Joseph Smith Jr. refused alcohol. So tell us about Joseph Smith Sr. Like, what was he like, right? Like, that would be the next kind of question.
So what is it about his dad that he would want to have his dad hold him?
What does it have to do with his dad, right? So we need to know various things then about Joseph Smith Sr. What was Joseph Smith Sr. character? What was his bond with Joseph Smith Jr.? What's going on in his life that might be relevant to all of this?
So you start digging this up?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, well, some of it I already knew, right? So for instance, Joseph Smith Sr.'s character, we're fortunate that we have patriarchal blessings that Joseph Smith Sr. gave to his children.
That's right. He was a patriarch. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They start doing patriarchal blessings in 1834. He gives patriarchal blessings to his children. They're so tender-hearted.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Again, can you give us an idea?
Just expressing, one thing I thought of doing in preparation for this and didn't for time reasons is actually looking for some actual quote. Well, I have one quote later, but like it's on this particular thing. Like just there's like an overflow of emotion. Well, gratitude. He expresses gratitude to Hiram, which I'll get into later, for like Hiram's acceptance of his father in spite of his father's weaknesses. You know, there's this overflow of emotion
in that
from Joseph Sr. Now, if you think about what we know about men, masculinity across generations, okay, men in like the current generation here, like more have been taught to be like kind of more emotionally sensitive and open and so on. You go back a couple generations, right, to like the let's say the guys who fought World War II, that generation, crusty, hard-shelled, more like hard-shelled emotion. Obviously, there's variation, but like that's their generation was more like that, right? And so that tends to be more the case as we go back in time, is you have more masculinity showing up in this more reserved, you know, less emotional way. Not Joseph Smith Sr., even though he lives in this earlier generation, very open-hearted, very tender-hearted, just overflowing with affection is the word I would use. His patriarchal blessings for his children just overflow with affection, his affection for them, right? And so this is the kind of father that Joseph Smith Jr. had. Their bond, okay, what about their bond? Well, for one thing, notice they're namesakes of each other. Right? They share a name, Joseph Smith. Glimpses into their bond, okay? When Joseph Jr. tells us in his 1838, 1839 history, when he first receives a visit from the angel, right, Angel Moroni, who's the first person he tells?
Tells his dad.
Dad. And what's his dad's reaction? He believes him immediately. He says, go do what the angel told you to do, right? Joseph Smith's reaction, this is another thing I thought of, like providing the actual wording, because we have it from Lucy, an account. Joseph Smith Jr. baptizes his father after the organization of the church in 1830. And the account of that is one of the greatest displays of emotion from Joseph Jr. that we have on record. He weeps, he cries and cries. He's so overjoyed. He says basically like, I can't believe I've lived to see my father baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ, right? Like He just is overflowing with emotion. Probably as a young child, Joseph Smith Sr. had not been baptized into a church, even though like the mother, Lucy, and some of the other children had, right? He's probably concerned about the welfare of his father's soul and so on. He's lived to baptize his father, right?
He's excited.
It's such a giant thing for him. Richard Bushman keys in on this.
Interesting.
Okay?
I didn't know this, but you think it's significant.
Oh, it's very significant. Richard Bushman keyed in on it, okay? In his biography of Joseph Smith Jr., Rough Stone Rolling, he said that one of Joseph Jr.'s motives in life, even in his prophetic calling, was to save his father, to benefit his father, right?
He says that.
Bushman says, if there was a personal motive for Joseph Smith Jr.'s revelations, it was to satisfy his family's religious want, and above all, to meet the need of his oft-defeated, unmoored father. Right? Joseph Smith Sr. had a lot of setbacks in his life. Not necessarily his fault, right? I mean, poverty. He came up with a brilliant plan as a sort of entrepreneur to, ship ginseng, which grew wild in where they lived in Vermont, to China, where it was very highly valued as an herb. He did an amazing job of this, and then he got swindled out of all the money by a dishonest business partner, right? So
Man.
his father went through a lot of struggles. Now, I found a source that has not ever been used before. Okay, well, I didn't find it directly, but I got it from a friend who
You just
found
say
it
that
over
so
in
casually.
Europe. So
You're like, I got this source that nobody's ever seen.
Okay, and I won't give the detail now because I want to do more with it, publish it. Okay, and my friend Niall Davidson found it for me, but shared it with me. But there was a Danish in the source. It's from this guy who gave sort of a travel log of his travels in America. He was from Denmark. He's a Danish businessman. He visits Nauvoo, happens to be shortly before Joseph Smith dies. Okay, and Joseph tells him a little bit about his own young life as a young man. And he says that one of his main motives as a young man was, quote, "I wished to honor my father." My father, specifically his father, right? He has this intense bond with his father. He when he's in pain, he cries out for comfort to his father, right? He overflows with emotion when he baptizes his father. His father's the first one he tells about Moroni. His father encourages him, right? He wants to honor his father specifically, right? So going back to our question, okay, why did Joseph Smith refuse the alcohol, especially in a time when everybody drank, okay? So store records of the time, in line with the fact that everybody drank in those days, okay? Store records in Palmyra show Joseph Smith Sr. purchasing liquor cider, okay? Fermented cider, right? Joseph Smith Sr.'s patriarchal blessing to his son Hiram, December 1834, says, among many other things, it says to Hiram, Thou hast always stood by thy father, and though he has been out of the way through wine, thou hast never forsaken him nor laughed him to scorn. Ooh. And later in this blessing, he goes on to really thank Hiram for accepting him with all his humanness, right? This is part of that overflow of emotion I was talking about, right? Affection. And he says, like, I've been out of the way with wine, right? He's alluding to the biblical story of Noah, where, like, it says that after the flood, they grow grapes again, and, like Noah makes wine, drinks, and he gets drunk, and one of his sons mocks him, right?
Oh, that's
because he was out of the way with wine, okay? And so Richard Bushman described Joseph Sr. as having a weakness for wine, okay? There are sources from Vermont, from New York, and from Ohio, all suggesting, 3 different states, right, suggesting that this was a challenge in Joseph Sr.'s life, right, alcohol. DNC4 in the 1835 version that we're familiar with, when it says, remember faith, virtue,
knowledge, temperance.
Right, knowledge, temperance. In the earliest version, it starts out, remember temperance.
The first one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is to Joseph Smith Sr. I should have mentioned that, I guess. And
it
started out, remember
that revelation.
Temperance, okay, which might, again, suggest that this is advice needed at the time for Joseph Smith Sr. Now, does this mean Joseph Smith Sr. was a person of low character and he was a drunk and all these? No, it doesn't mean any such thing, okay? So Richard Bushman is pointing it out that Joseph Smith Sr.'s alcohol consumption was likely not unusual for the time, okay? But what was the alcohol consumption on average at the time? It was an average of 4 drinks a day. The CDC standard now, Center for Disease Control, for what it considers heavy drinking is about half that, okay? So the average alcohol consumption for an adult at that time is twice the standard for what constitutes heavy drinking now, okay? So if Joseph Smith Sr. just drank what was average, he would have been a very heavy drinker by today's standards. That's going to be a problem for anybody. That creates problems in your life, right? Okay. So, Joseph Smith Sr., going back to the surgery, okay, Joseph Smith Sr. was watching his 7-year-old son die was watching his son die. Right? How do you cope with watching your child die? This is actually something I can speak to from experience. Okay. I have 2 wonderful sons. I've already mentioned my younger son, Nicholas. I also have an older son, Donnie, who is my namesake, right? Like Joseph Jr. was Joseph Sr.'s namesake. The close bond between father and son is something that I understand very deeply. Right? My son, Donnie, I described how Joseph Smith Sr. was very tender-hearted. I mentioned, the tender-heartedness of my son Nicholas back when he was 7. My son Donnie was very tender-hearted. He also had a great depth of character, like I've described for both Joseph Smiths. When Donnie was about 7, actually, it's about 7. One night I had tucked Donnie Nicholas into bed, as I did every night, and I went out to the front room and I was thinking or something, sitting on the couch, and I heard the padding of little feet in the hall. And I was like, oh, somebody's out of bed, right? It was like 45 minutes after I tucked him in, so somebody should not have still been up, right? Oh, somebody's still up. I walked around the corner, and there was Donnie with tears streaming down his cheeks. And I said, Donnie, I said, sweetheart, what's wrong? And he looked up at me, and he said, Dad, I'll miss you when you die. He was such a deep thinker and feeler, even as a young child, that he was already thinking about the fact that someday I would die and he would miss me. It turned out that Donnie has died not long ago. And I missing Donnie. Brilliant, creative, just an open heart, an open soul, a philosopher, a poet, a polymath. There's someone who's an expert in a lot of different things, and had a lot of struggles in his life. And maybe we can put up a picture of Donnie. Of course. And do this. Donnie and I, and Donnie, like, he had so much to live for, right? He and I had a wonderful bond. Like Joseph Smith Sr., I've had to face my son's death, but unlike Joseph Sr., I've had to actually have it happen, right? I've had to actually go through it. And he died with so much to live for. Not long after he died, I found on his computer, his brother and I found on his computer, a book of poetry that he wrote that he was close to getting published called Light of an Hour. This beautiful poetry, which I'm going to publish, right? Of course. So, we're talking today most specifically about the prophet Joseph Smith and about his surgery and his character, right? But there's this giant larger context, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? That he worked to restore, right? And that context is the context in which, the unexpected death of my son, right? Like, I never knew I could experience so much pain. But because of the gospel of Jesus Christ, Donnie will get to fulfill his potential. I will see Donnie again. We will be together again. Me, Donnie, and Nicholas, right? We'll be a family, right? And that same bond of father and son will continue, right? Will continue for eternity. And that, what we're talking about here, this is what this is ultimately all about, right? We want to understand Joseph Smith, the character Joseph Smith. We understand his motives. We want to understand what he was doing as the prophet of the restoration. But we also want to understand the restoration. And the restoration of what? The restoration of like aspects of, because it wasn't all lost. I mean, the gospel's there in the New Testament, right? Aspects of the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? And so you were asking earlier about sort of why this hits me the way that it does, this subject. I mean, it hit me with a lot of this force years ago when I first made the discoveries. Hits me even more now, right? This father-son bond of Joseph Sr. and Joseph Jr.
It's even more obvious to you now. Is that what you're saying?
It may be more obvious, but I feel it more keenly. I mean, seeing that Joseph Sr. was watching his son die, right? If something didn't happen, his son was going to die. In the wake of my son's death, in the wake of Donnie's death, like, I'm still reassessing, like, most of the things that people trouble themselves about, and certainly most of the conflicts that people get in with other people, from the vantage point of having just lost my son, it's ridiculous trivia. It's, silly. Like, there are things that really, really matter, right? There are things that are permanent, things of permanent value, things that are of depth, right? Obviously, like our relationship with God, right? Our family relationships, right? Like the things that we can do for other people, the ways we can contribute to the lives of others. This is actually something Donnie said a lot in his last couple of years was, that he wanted was what he wanted most of all was to contribute to the lives of others. That's what matters, right? Like our relationship with our Father in heaven, our Savior, our families, and what we can contribute in this world, right? Because it's like when Christ gave the parable of like the man who was like he stored up a lot of goods for himself, right? And he's like, basically like, I'm gonna live an easy life from now on. And it's like, that very night, right, he dies, right? Well, what was all that for? Nothing, right? And so it's the gospel points us to the things that actually matter, right? So as I think about Joseph Sr., right, watching his son die, right?
He's thinking this.
Yeah, I can understand. I can sympathize, right? And it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he didn't. I mean, everybody drank then. We know he drank. Wouldn't surprise me if he found some additional consolation in alcohol, right?
Ignore it.
I mean,
dull the pain.
Dull the intense pain and anxiety of wondering if his son is going to live, watching his son helplessly, watching his son waste away, right? So what am I getting at? Okay, what I've been building to something. What am I building to? Right. My idea, okay, my insight, looking at all this. When I was an ex-Mormon atheist, okay, was what would make sense of this is if Joseph Smith Jr. refused the alcohol in order to be strong for his father. We already know he's trying to be strong for his mother, right? Mom, go far away. I don't want you in the room here, right? I don't want you to hear this. I don't want you to see this. But he's having his dad be strong, right? And he's having his dad be strong in part for him as a child, right? But why isn't he taking the alcohol? Why is he having his dad hold him instead of drinking the alcohol? He's trying to set an example for his own father, right? It's basically, if I can do this without alcohol, so can you, right? This would make sense of Lucy Mack Smith's narrative, right? And the thing is, we know that alcohol consumption is going on in the background of all this because of other sources, because of store records, and so on, right? But Lucy never mentions it. Lucy doesn't hint at it, right?
Really?
So why would she work something into her narrative that makes sense if you know about it? Why would she work in Joseph Jr. refusing alcohol but having his father hold him while she's not giving the context that, if she's making the story up, I'm saying. This is not how she wouldn't make up a story that reflects a context that she's not disclosing, right?
For no reason. Why would she add that? What you're saying?
Yeah. So that, as a historian, what you do, so there are different kinds of reasoning, right? So there's deductive reasoning. This is like what philosophers and mathematicians use, right? There's inductive reasoning. This is just a lot in the sciences. We look at, so deductive, people know, is like, all men are mortal. Socrates was a man, therefore Socrates was mortal, right? Like inductive reasoning is, well, we look at, there are regularities in nature. When you put hydrogen and oxygen together with a certain amount of energy, you always get water, right? Like, so we generalize that to
causation,
a law, right? Historians do something called abductive reasoning, or inference to the best explanation. That is, what would best explain these events? What would best explain these events is Joseph Jr. is trying to help his dad. Now, it turns out there's research on dying children. A few decades ago, there was a psychologist, she thought to do something that apparently nobody had thought to do, and that is she started interviewing children with terminal illnesses and interviewing their parents, right?
Wait, how long ago was this?
Oh, I think now it's probably in the 80s or something. Okay. It's a little bit ago. Okay. But people hadn't done this research before. And what she found is that dying children are well aware that they're dying. They know that they're watching their parents watch them die. And one thing that they sometimes do is try to parent their parents. Look at Joseph Jr. Mom, you have to go far away. I'm not going to let you be here. No, you can't proceed with the surgery till mom is gone. He's screaming in agony, but he's got the presence of mind to insist mom's got to go out there. He is parenting the parent.
Even kids who aren't dying do this.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Children who are dying especially are prone to do this because they recognize the suffering of their parents. They know they're watching their parents suffer because of them. They know their parents are suffering because they're watching them die. Joseph Jr. is parenting mom. He's also parenting dad. He's trying to set an example for his father. So back to a question we asked before. What kind of person was Joseph Smith?
What do you think?
Okay. When I was doing my graduate work, we read a book on how to do history called The Landscape of History by a famous historian of the Cold War, John Lewis Cowdeis. He talks in there about how do you do different kinds of history. One unique kind of history that it talks about is biography. And what he says is, when you're trying to explain an extraordinary person, look for extraordinary events in their early life. What was extraordinary about Joseph Smith Jr.'s early life? What is it that set him up to become the prophet that the Lord chose through his first vision? What is it that set him up for this religious career. And what is it early in his childhood that shows something exceptional and creates something exceptional in him? The most extraordinary thing about Joseph Smith's childhood was that he went through experimental surgery without anesthetic in order to help his father.
And you're saying
that's absolutely extraordinary. There were only a few dozen people in the history of the United States who ever had this surgery. Only Nathan Smith, that doctor, he was the only one who knew how to do it. He was the one who created it. And the instructions he left behind, other people tried it after he died and they weren't able to make it work correctly. Only very few people ever had this surgery, and probably only one of them ever had it without anesthetic, and certainly probably only one child ever without anesthetic, Joseph Smith.
He's the only one. There's maybe two.
Almost certainly. He would have been the only one. So this was exceptional. So look at this kid. So first of all, what a noble child.
Would do that.
That he would do this for his parents. So if we want a sense of what kind of person Joseph Smith was, what kind of child? Let's look at what kind of child Joseph Smith was. He was this kind of child. Okay? He was a noble child who was looking out for other people, particularly his family, his parents, his father.
I think this is amazing to me. This is like mind blowing, because we've looked at that story so many times, and you're telling me that this is like one of the more foundational ones.
To me, it's a key.
And in fact, you're saying this is like, to you in your own words, this is the most foundational of all of the insights that you have found. I'm just trying to imagine. Some people might be thinking and like listening or watching this and think, this might be a little bit of a stretch, right? I'm not saying that. I think that it's amazing. What would you say to that idea of people who might think, okay, this is a stretch? What would you say to that?
I mean, I'd say a few things just right off the bat. First of all, I'm not drawing this idea just in the abstract. We have research on children who are dying, and that research shows that some of those children act to parent their parents. Secondly, the account itself directly shows, without any inference, that he's trying to take care of his mother in the situation. He insists that she leave, and even in the middle of the surgery, twice, after they take out the first piece of bone, and when they crack out and pull out the third piece of bone, he won't allow them to continue the surgery unless his mother goes out. We can tell he's trying to parent his parents because he's clearly trying to take care of his mother.
Yeah. Third,
like, okay, imagine the intensity of the pain, okay? Yeah. I mean, imagine right now, okay, your left leg, right? Somebody comes in, no anesthetic, nothing, okay?
I mean, I hate shots,
they start cutting. They imagine some guy walking in. Skylar walks in with an old-fashioned 19th century wooden drill, okay, and he starts drilling into your bone, and then we've got hammers and chisels and saws, okay, and we do that for 9 big pieces of your shin bone.
No anesthesia.
Okay, and why? If you don't have a really strong motive for this, you're going to fold right after they start drilling. You're going to say, I thought I could do this without anesthesia. I've changed my mind. Okay. Joseph Jr., he's 7. He goes through with the whole thing.
Yeah.
You're telling me, what's the motive? You're telling me this happens without some big motive? No, it doesn't. He's got a giant motive. He's got a strong motive. And he links it directly with his father. No, I won't take the liquor, but I'll have my father hold me. Mom, you need to go. Dad, I need you to hold me. Okay? There's something going on inside him that explains this. What is it? Okay, so if someone were to reject the motive that he's trying to parent the parent, well, first, we have larger research showing some dying children do this, okay? So this isn't from out of the blue, okay? Second, he's clearly trying to take care of his mother, so why would we think he's not trying to take care of his father? Third, what he's trying to do here, what I'm positing trying to do, fits with a context that we know about his father already, and it would actually explain. So when we're trying to come up with, infer to the best explanation, an explanation that fits the context that we know about alcohol in the household, okay, and the level of drinking in the culture at the time, okay. Joseph Smith Sr. saying he'd been out of the way with wine and so on. It fits with the actions sometimes of children who know they're watching their parents watch them die, that they try to take care of their parents. It fits with what he's doing with his mother, and it would explain why he takes this extraordinary action of refusing the alcohol and continuing to refuse the alcohol while pairing that with having his father hold him instead of using the only anesthetic. It explains, it ties it all up with a bow, right?
This is a special kid.
Right. So come up with a better explanation, right? If you got a better explanation, that's great. But this, you've got multiple arrows pointing to the same thing, and it ties it all up, right? It explains it in a simple, straightforward way. So the surgery, right? Yes, this is an extraordinary child. This is a noble child.
I'm just trying to make sure that I have that. Is that what your thesis, your perspective, your lens is? I'm saying it like, yeah, he's a special kid. You're saying it like, this is significant.
Yeah. So why is this significant?
Yeah.
Why is this significant?
Yeah.
So first off, it tells us something about what kind of child what kind of human being we're starting with here. So the theory, the common ex-Mormon idea, Joseph Smith, he's a terrible human being who just comes up with this whole religion entirely for self-serving reasons. That's what I thought, right? This guy thought that, right? I was wrong. Okay, this is by no means the only thing that shows that. There are plenty of things that show that. We've talked about some of them. We can talk about many more, and there will be many more that I'll publish on and that other people will. Right?
Yeah.
This shows the nobility of the child. Okay, well,
powerful.
The child, as they say, the child is the father to the man. He's not going to be a totally different person as an adult than he was a child, and in fact, this surgery, I would argue, both reflects and shapes Joseph Smith's character. Okay, so it reflects his character because we see what he's like as a kid. Right?
Under pressure.
We see that he, for one thing, determination, iron will. He follows this thing through. He says he's going to refuse the alcohol. He follows that through all 9 of those pieces of bone being drilled and hacked out of his shin, right? Okay. He is doing this for other people. He does this the way he does for his mom and his dad, right? He's other-oriented. He's family-focused, right? He's focused on saving the father, right? Taking care of his parents, saving his father in particular. There's something in psychology called post-traumatic growth. Now, people are familiar with post-traumatic stress, and we would expect that. I'm sure Joseph Smith did have post-traumatic stress. I don't see how it's possible you could not from that kind of experience, okay? There's research now showing post-traumatic growth. People go through trauma, and this was, if this was anything, it was trauma, okay? Childhood trauma. People who go through trauma can grow amazingly. Maybe this is part of what makes Joseph Smith, so to speak, right? Makes him able to do the things that he does in his life, right? Is the growth that he has from this. Another thing I would point out, also from psychology, okay, it's a psychological principle. It's also a spiritual principle. But it's documented in psychological research. Is this principle that sacrifice increases commitment? Okay, we become what we sacrifice for.
Wait, now, that's powerful right there. Ooh. Wait a second. I'm just trying to let it marinate for a minute. So you're saying this sacrifice is kind of how this is like what do you call it in like novels, right? The becoming. What is the word? Like when you remember in middle school, it's that moment. It's the transitional moment, the transformation moment.
Yeah.
Is that what you're alluding to? Is what I'm saying with this?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah. We become what we sacrifice for. So when people sacrifice for some cause, for some purpose, they become more of that. They become more committed to that. They come to value it more. It becomes more part of them. I mean, part of their heart. You could say in this case, even like part of his bones, right? Like,
but in connection to his son, I think that's what makes it so interesting to me. Is that what you're referring to? His sacrifice for his dad and
his
teaching and
sacrifice
parenting
for
his
dad,
the bond to his dad.
the sacrifice on behalf of his father. Right, he becomes
this guy
who works to save his father, works to save the fathers. Right, so commitment to saving his father and even to saving the fathers, the ancestors, becomes it's there already. It's reflected by this. But it gets cemented. It becomes more, by the depth of this childhood sacrifice, it becomes who he is, right? So it's not just any boy who does the various things that Joseph Smith does, okay? It's this boy. This boy becomes the man who wanted to honor his father when he was a teenager, right? Told this visitor, I wanted to honor my father. That's part of what motivated him. It's this boy who sees the Father and the Son. Right? It's this boy who works to restore the covenant of the fathers, quote unquote, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? It's this boy who goes on to institute baptism for the dead to save the fathers, the ancestors. Right? So Joseph Smith's revelations come because of questions, right? They come because of seeking. Baptism is not going to drop down him from out of the blue. It's because he's seeking, how do we save the fathers, the ancestors? And maybe what I'm suggesting is maybe part of that motive is already there to save his father, to care for his parents, to save his ancestors. Part of that motive is already there when he's 7, and it's reflected in the sacrifice he makes for his father at his childhood surgery. But part of that motive is increased, it's cemented, it becomes not just a value, but a commitment. It becomes an identity. That becomes who this guy is. So that as he goes through his life, right, this is one of the big things that's motivating him. And it results in the revelation of principles like that of work for the dead.
Wow, which is what he spends the rest of his whole time doing, right?
Right.
So that's what I'm understanding you're saying. That if you want to know about an extraordinary person, you look at the extraordinary events. This extraordinary event.
This was the most extraordinary event.
This sacrifice is what sealed his identity, which he becomes, and which is why he's suited to be the guy that God would want to choose to restore humanity, which is what Moroni tells him. Right.
Well, and when you look at
the very first revelation.
Right. And when you look at what Moroni tells him, he tells him that he's going to fulfill various prophecies, including the prophecy of Malachi of the turning of the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. Right. Joseph Jr. clearly, his heart is turned toward his father, right? And he has a loving, tender, affectionate father. His heart is turned toward him. Perhaps the seed of the fulfillment of this prophecy and the restoration comes at the sacrifice that Joseph Smith Jr. makes for his father, Joseph Smith Sr., at his leg surgery when he is 7 years old. And that helps cement this. This is much of what his life, much of what his prophetic career is about. So why would the Lord have chosen Joseph Smith Sr. to do this work? Well, why would he have not chosen him, right? He would have chosen him, I'm suggesting, right, because of how Joseph Jr. demonstrated his commitment to saving his father when he was 7. And because of how the sacrifice he made for his father, that sacrifice itself enhanced that commitment and became who he was.
And that means something to you, significantly.
It means the world to me. I mean, it did when I discovered it years ago. It means all the more To me, no. Right? As a father.
Even more
of
than
my
before.
sons. Yeah.
I didn't want to press too hard, and I've just been sitting here listening because this is so interesting and it's so significant to you right now.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be significant to many people. I think that all of us have these connections, these bonds, familially, in family, whether we've been abandoned or not. We have this desire to have that connection. We have this desire to be restored to the past. But I just was curious. I just wanted to go back to that time when you were talking about your own son. Why? And of course, it's obvious that it means something to you. But what are some of the thoughts that have been on your mind lately as you revisit these ideas of Joseph, as you consider their current circumstance, grieving, over mourning the loss of your son?
Yeah. When Donnie was not much older than Joseph Smith was at the time of surgery, Donnie was 8. He became aware. I didn't tell him directly because I wouldn't have wanted to burden him with it, but he became aware through someone else telling him about just some major things that I was going through in my life. And it really, it unsettled him, you know. And I remember Donnie trying to parent me, right, as children do, right? At sometimes, some children, right? I remember him trying to like take care of me. My children and I have had an intense bond. Donnie and I certainly had a really intense, close father-son connection. And so Joseph, the connection between Joseph Sr. and Joseph Jr., it makes all the sense in the world to me, right? The emotional intensity, the depth, the meaning of that connection, and the love and care going both ways, going both direction in that bond, right? Just the obvious affection of the father to the son and of the son to the father. This is what my relationship with my sons has been like, Donnie and Nicholas. And this, Donnie just has been someone of such extraordinary emotional depth from the time he was young, right? Like Joseph Smith was at the time of his surgery. And, you know, I think about, I alluded to earlier, the first vision, right, is an experience of the Father and the Son, right? And it's an experience of the Father and the Son in perfect alignment with one another. We don't know who the first person was that Joseph told about his first vision, but I have a suspicion, okay? We do know, because Joseph Jr. tells us directly, that the first person he told about the visit of the angel Moroni was his father, and his father believed immediately and told him, go and do what the angels told you to do. We also know, though, that when Joseph Jr. came home from the Sacred Grove, he tells us the first person he encountered was his mother, and she saw that he was exhausted, and she asked him what was the matter, and he said, "It is all right, mother, I'm well enough off, but I have learned from myself that Presbyterianism is not true." Full stop, right? He didn't tell her he'd seen God. Who was the first person he told? I would say probably likely the first person he tells about his vision of the Father and the Son is his father, Joseph Sr., right? Just like that's the first person he tells about the angel Moroni. It appears to certainly not immediately telling his mother, right? Christ, in his relationship to the Father, this relationship of extraordinary intimacy and depth in the scriptures, right? In our King James translation, it's usually translated just like Father, the word that Jesus used. People pointed out that in Aramaic, it's Abba, right? Daddy. It's Abba. I used to have neighbors who were from the Middle East, and I heard the little ones talk to their father, And they said, I think it sounded more like Baba to me. I'd hear it through the wall. But they said something very similar, right? The little ones. And I've been told that if you visit the Middle East now, parts of the Middle East, you hear the children calling their daddies Abba, right? Jesus said, that he came to do the will of his Father. He spoke with such affection, right, in his prayers, right, to his Father, right? We have a Father in heaven who Jesus, of course, had this absolutely unique relationship with the Father, but we're brought into that, right? Like, we have a Heavenly Father who cares so tenderly for us and whom we can serve, right? We can do his will. When the Father and the Son appear to Joseph Smith, what does the Father say? What's the first thing he says? This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. So he's speaking his delight in his beloved Son, right? And his love for his Son. He's expressing his love for his Son. And he says, hear him, right? The Father is affirming the Son, and then the Son is giving a message from the Father to Joseph Jr. And by the way, Joseph says he addresses him, Joseph, my son. Okay? Joseph, my son. So there's this father-son theme that's even woven in its depths in Joseph Smith's first prophetic experience, the first vision, right? It's there. Well, again, why choose this guy for that experience? Joseph Jr. understands the depth of this bond, right? His own father-son bond is so intense and deep, and he has tried to serve his Father, right? So he, in that way, can understand the Son, right? He can understand Jesus Christ, right? And Christ speaks to him as his son, right? He addresses him, Joseph, my son, right? The scriptures talk about us all as sons and daughters of Christ, right? We're adopted, and baptism is seen as one way that happens, right? And so there's this father-son, like, spiritual intimacy that's reflected between the Father and the Son in the first vision, and then that's communicated to Joseph Smith as a child of God in the first vision. And, parenting provides a kind of glimpse, right, of that love, right, that exists between the Father and the Son, and that also exists, and that our love for our children provides a glimpse, right, of the love that God has for us. And in getting to be a dad of Donnie and of Nicholas, like, I've gotten to have a glimpse. And, don't get me wrong, like losing Donnie, the pain that I go through every single day, right, is more than I knew that I could suffer. But that, like, we grieve in accordance to how much we love, right? And so that pain, the fact that I suffer more than I knew I could suffer, is because I love more than I knew I could love. And that is a reflection to us, right? It's an expression of the love that God has for us, right? And the love that he manifests through his beloved Son, Jesus Christ, and extends to us, and through which our bonds with those that we love, our children, right? Our sons and daughters, our parents, our spouses, our loved ones, can be secured forever, right? And that whatever has happened to them in this world where there is so much injustice and so much pain and so much that people should not have to suffer, right? Like, it's not the last word, not even close, right? That we and our loved ones will thrive, will flourish for eternity within the love of our Father in heaven through his beloved Son.
That's powerful, man. That vicarious connection, it teaches us more about him, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
That it's hard to learn any other way. And I know that there are people who are, different circumstances, don't have an ability to have children in this life. Sometimes, and I know that's not even close to what you're saying. And even that is in the plan that he has for us. Experience is what I'm understanding it, the real experience of family. It gives us a glimpse into what God experiences. And it's what's divinely a part of us, is what I'm hearing you say. And even as you've mentioned it to me, I agree with you is what I want to say. I agree with you. It's such a tender thing. You mentioned before, and I wanted to touch on this, and I don't know, because I think that there might be people that are coping too, that are mourning with this. You mentioned the way that he coped, right? And I don't want to allude to the fact that that you coped the same way. I'm just saying, because I think I don't think that that's what you meant. And who cares if it is? For you, I'm saying people, it might be challenging for them to consider this question for themselves. How do you cope with something like that? How do you cope?
Yeah.
How do you, because I don't think that the pain goes away.
I don't think the pain goes away. I don't think the pain will go away. And there's a lot of, in the particulars, right? There's a lot that Donnie suffered before he died. And there's a lot of senselessness in his death. And that makes the pain that much more difficult to endure. And I don't have some sort of answer, right? I do know that I'm not, there are times that I'm angry with God, okay? But I used to wonder, so something that people who've watched the previous, the first interview that we did, we've done more than one, but the first interview that we did where we went into detail about my spiritual journey, something that they may know or maybe not, I talked about it some there, is when I was out of the church, I left the church officially, I was out for 5 years. When I left the church, I not only had stopped believing in the restoration, I had stopped believing in God. And the main reason that I had stopped believing in God was the problem of evil and suffering, is the fact that I was aware of instances of just the most horrendous human suffering, and that there were two main kinds. The main one was the sufferings of children, and the other, which was, it wasn't as big in my mind as that, but it was a pretty big trigger for me in this regard to my loss of belief in God, was mental illness, because I got a glimpse of what people go through with mental illness. And my son Donnie had some struggles with that much later, not at that time. He was just a young boy then. And so when something that I came to wonder about myself when I did come to believe in God, which people can watch our previous interview about, right? Like if they want to know more about that. And there's more I could say about that maybe in the future as well. But like, something I came to wonder after I came to believe in God again is, am I just believing in God again in spite of human suffering because it hasn't happened to me in the big ways, to me or to my children, right? Well, in the most tragic way possible, I have the answer to that question now. When I found out certain news about my son's death, I screamed. And while I was screaming and screaming, I heard something I don't even understand deep inside of me talk to God and say, I trust you, God. And the pain didn't stop. And the screaming didn't stop. I kept screaming. On some level, and I don't even understand how it's possible, that I trust God, and I can't say that at every moment I feel that, right? I mentioned sometimes being angry with God. But I heard my own voice from the depths of my soul say, I trust you, God. Right? And so I don't have the answers, right? I have a lot of thoughts, and those I'm still working out some of them. I have a lot of thoughts about suffering, right? Why things happen the way that they do. And the thing that I look at the most, though, is we don't know all the whys of suffering, but there are things that we do know. Okay? When Christ came, he suffered. Okay, and the Book of Mormon talks about a title page. It says, Jesus is the Christ, the eternal God, manifesting himself on all nations. Abinadi and King Benjamin both refer to Christ coming before he comes, saying, God himself shall come down among the children of men and take upon him our sufferings, right? So God, in Christ, God is suffering our sufferings, right? So we do not suffer alone. And this is something that Donnie actually, just a few months before he died, in a gratitude journal that he wrote about how much sense it made to him and how grateful he was that Christ suffered all his pains. And he suffered many pains, right? My son. And we do not suffer alone. What I suffer, I am not suffering alone, right? But Jesus didn't just come to suffer our sufferings, as enormous as that is. He also came to declare an end to those things. Not yet, right? But sort of the beginning of the end of the fallen world, right? And Jesus talked about Satan as sort of like the prince of this world, and other scriptures talk about that, right? That our world is not, things are not as they should be. We can see this all the time, right? When we see gratuitous suffering, when we see even death itself, the scriptures talk about, Apostle Paul said, death is the last enemy that shall be overcome, right? Ultimately, the things as they are on this fallen world is not how they're meant to be. Creation is not complete. God is still completing the creation. And when Christ came, his resurrection happened, interestingly, not on the Sabbath, not on the Jewish Sabbath, the seventh day when God rested. It happened on the morning of the first day, Well, in the scriptures, what's the significance? The seventh day, 6 days God creates, 6 days he labored, 7th day he rested. That's why, the people were commanded to rest on that day. Sunday is the first day of the week. What did God do on the morning of the first day? He began the creation. Christ's resurrection is the beginning of a new creation. It's the creation of the world as it ultimately is supposed to be, right? That in the resurrection of Christ, we see how things are supposed to be. That death is overcome. Death has been overcome in Christ. That will be extended to all of us. There will be no more death, right? There will be no more tears. There will be no more gratuitous suffering, right? And Jesus came, he healed people. He cast out devils. He healed people of physical illness. He healed people from mental illness, right? Those things are not going to be anymore after he comes again, right? And he invites us as the body of Christ now, right? The church is called the body of Christ. Christ's resurrected body is gone now, but Paul talks about us having like the spirit of the resurrection. He lives within us. We are empowered to do amazing things. Christ said, he healed people, but he said, greater works than these shall ye do, right? That to heal, whether through spiritual means, through scientific means as well, increasingly, right? To heal people, to bring back the dead. People can die now and they can sometimes be resuscitated. Our ability to bring back the dead in the future, as well as to heal people from all kinds of afflictions, will increase. We can grow in that. Ultimately, right, our promise is the promise of a new creation where things are going to be the way that they're supposed to be. And so the hope offered by Christ when he came into the world was always what would be called an eschatological hope, meaning a hope that comes at the end, right? Like that the hope that lies in the future. We don't just have to rely on the world as it is now. This is not how things are ultimately meant to be. This is not, the world's not going to go on forever in the grip of suffering and death, death and suffering of all different kinds. Those things will have an end, right? And Jesus' resurrection shows us the beginning of a new creation, how life is meant to be, how it will ultimately be. That is where hope lies in the future. I can't explain everything that has happened in the past, that happens now, right? These are things that are known to God. Like I said, I have thoughts, right? I think about it a lot, of course, every day, right?
Yeah, you've been deep into this. I can feel it.
Yeah.
This is what you've been studying, it sounds like.
Yeah. But yes, but our ultimate hope is in the future.
I love what Elder Faith is always pointing towards the future. The past is to be learned from, not to be lived in.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's got to be so empowering for people to experience what you're saying, to understand what you've been through in the way that you can now declare this to us now. And it doesn't feel like you're trying to prove it to me. It doesn't feel like you're trying to, it feels like you believe it. Why do you believe it?
Why do I believe this?
Yeah. Why do you have hope?
Why do I have hope?
In this, what you just described.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that there are so many reasons to believe in God, right? And there are reasons that are personal to my own experience, and there are reasons that are more sort of larger things where we're endowed with reason. We have minds that are able, that seek truth, right? This has been a theme that we've talked about, is seeking truth, right? We're given like this hunger for the truth that's inherent in human beings. We don't want to know falsehoods. We want to know the truth. We don't want to know the truth often when we think the truth might be painful, right? But why do we have this love of the truth if the truth isn't somehow also ultimately the good, right? If the ultimate truth we were all going to find is everything sucks, it's meaningless, here today, gone tomorrow, right? It would be strange that we have implanted in us, in our natures, a love of truth, right? We are endowed with reason. We can use reason to think about ultimate things. Why is there something instead of nothing, right? Like why is there such a thing as goodness? Why is there such a thing as reason that points us to truth? Why do we have a moral sense that points us to the good? If we were to believe just like a sort of naturalistic explanation of things, there's not really good. Where would good exist? If all there is particles and forces, where is goodness? Where is moral? Where does moral truth? Does it exist in electrons? Does it exist in gravity? I mean, it wouldn't be real. So, and there are people who say that they don't believe that ultimately there is moral truth, but who not, because they don't believe in a God, they're naturalists, right? Atheists, but they live as if they did. Well, maybe there's a sort of disconnect between what they're saying they believe and the fact that on some level they clearly believe
something,
in some kind of moral truth. Something that I've noticed since Donnie has died that I've reflected on a lot is almost pretty much I think every normal person, if they have a loved one, someone that they love, die, they want to fulfill wishes of that person, right? But if you really believe that person no longer exists, what difference does it make? And yet we all, every normal person, wants to fulfill the hopes and the wishes of their deceased loved one. It's like no matter what we say, we believe, we still are living out a different truth, right? We're living out the truth that there is such a thing as goodness, and it matters, right? That there is such a thing as moral truth. We're living out the truth that our loved ones continue, and therefore it matters to them if we do things on their behalf, right? If we fulfill their hopes. When we pursue truth, even if the truth that we think we're finding, as I once thought, was that there wasn't a God and, Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet, why was I pursuing the truth that it's not like I liked believing those things. I thought that they were true, but encoded in the very idea that of pursuing the truth is the idea that somehow ultimately the truth is good. But if you hold to certain beliefs, the truth isn't good, the truth is bad. And yet we have encoded in us, in our natures, the idea, ultimately the truth is good. It's a good to be pursued. Whatever it is, I want to find it because it's ultimately we have this sense it's going to be good, right? Those are things that are sort of built into us as human beings, right? That we can deny, but they're still there, right? Using our reason, asking questions like other questions like, what is the nature of ultimate reality? For instance, like, why is there something instead of nothing? Or looking at, as we talked about in our first interview, right? Like about my spiritual journey, like, why is
what brought you back?
The universe, like, why should any of this exist, right? Like, why should there be life? Like the chances, there's a problem in science called the problem of the fine-tuning of the constants of the universe for the existence of life. The chances of our being here, one noted astronomer estimated at 1 in the 10 to the 200th power. The chances that the laws of the universe would favor life, if they're set at random, is 1 in 10 to the 200th power. Well,
that's crazy.
10 to the 200th power, anybody who claims they understand the magnitude of that number is lying, right? Like, that 10 to the 9th is a billion. Nobody really understands the magnitude of a billion, much less this number, right? And like the nature of consciousness. I mean, you and I are both aware right now. Is that supposed to just be meat in our heads, right? How does that explain anything, right? There are, and on and on and on, right? We could go on for quite a while, right? There are so many things that point to the existence of something more, that point to the existence of God. And there are things for me in my life in particular that point to God, right? Like an experience that I talked about that saved my life, a kind of warning experience where I couldn't have known what was going to happen, but something saved my life. What am I going to believe? What am I going to think about that? Am I going to be grateful for that? Or am I just going to dismiss it? Am I going to try to live in relationship to the one who saved me? Or just put it out, oh, whatever, I get to live my life, but, kind of like, who cares, right? And so there are ways that we can each, the promise of prophets, the promise of spiritually advanced people down through the ages has been not just that like they know something that we can't know. It's that we can pursue those things and know them too, right? And so as Christ said, if any man shall do his will, he shall know the doctrine, whether I speak of myself or of my Father, basically. That's what he said, right? And so like we have to, spiritual truth is something that, partly it involves thinking, partly it involves like living for it, right?
Yeah. To me, when you were talking about Donnie, I just wanted to ask you, because I'm understanding you saying there's a pursuit of something. It can't be nothing. Even people who don't believe in God, when people die, they still want to help them. They want to help them fulfill the things that they didn't get to fulfill. And so then if that's the case, then what do you believe? And I just, right when you said that, I wanted to ask you, well, what is it that you want to help him to continue to pursue?
All kinds of things. I mentioned Donnie's book of poetry, just profound, beautiful poetry. He always had such a passion for words from the time he was little. I'm doing editing on it now and so on, but I'm going to publish his book of poetry, Light of an Hour.
I just wanted to take a quick second and let you know that after this episode, there's going to be a bonus. We're actually going to have Don read his son's poetry, Donnie Jr., as a tribute to him. So stick around for that, and let's get you back to the episode.
He had so many brilliant thoughts on so many things that I am gathering up and want to put out to the world in different forms. I will be starting a website, donniebradley.com. I've purchased the domain. It put pictures, and he even dabbled a little bit years ago in creating music. Well, actually, he created a lot of rap songs.
Yeah.
And Donnie, later in his life, because of some struggles that he had, this didn't always manifest as much. It manifested more earlier, but like just had this deep passion for life, like a zest, like an energy. And so I want to live deeply. Donnie wrote us several years ago when he was having health problems, and he wondered, because he carried substantial health problems. He had an autoimmune disorder. He never complained, right? But he carried a lot. And one time when he was worried about himself, he wrote a note in his journal to his family, and it told us, just out of the depths of his heart, like, I'm going to ask you something very difficult. I'm going to ask you that you be happy. Right? I want you to be happy for me. I want you to, it's your job now to take care of each other and to let yourselves be taken care of, let yourselves be helped. And just really profound things. I want to do those things. I want to, as much pain as I'm going through, I want to try to live deeper and have a lot of experiences that I can share with Donnie, find things that would delight him that we can share in a coming day, right? Like in the resurrection. And there are things that I've done to preserve Donnie's memories and like a lot of things. And, we don't know everything that we as human beings will be able to do in the future with our technologies in terms of, even doing remarkable things that we might not be able to envision now, even for people who've passed on, right? Who knows what ultimately God has in store for us all.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love it. Even just hearing you say it, I can feel the care that you have for him, and the. It's like he still exists. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, it's not that it's like done, it's over. I mean, his body has, he's buried in the earth, but he's still somewhere,
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, and you didn't say that. I just think it's just interesting to think that. And I'm sure it gives some type of hope, Yeah. I think that's important for people, especially coming from you, who has had so many experiences, right? Going through, in the church, out of the church, believing God, not believing God at all, and God at all. And now you're sitting here declaring to us and to me that you have hope.
Oh, I have hope.
Even though you've been going through some of the hardest, I understand the hardest time of your life.
By far, by anything. I've lost my mom. I've lost a dad. I have two dads, but I've lost a dad. I lost my younger brother, Charles, as I think we talked about before, when he was 25.
Yeah.
I've suffered loss. Losing a child, there isn't anything there isn't another loss that's like it. And I experienced tremendous pain, and I've had moments of deep despair as well as anguish, and terrible grief, right? And I have hope. I have absolutely not given up on my son, right? Like I have every expectation of seeing him again, of seeing my two sons, Donnie and Nicholas, together again, which will be the greatest delight that this father's heart can have.
That's important. Wow, that's so insightful. I have 4 boys, and I can't imagine what you've been through, man. What do you want people to understand? And I think that's more of, what is God teaching you about his son? What is he teaching you about his son? You've already said many things in that regard, I would think, but I'm curious of what these lessons are that might be beneficial to other people, What are some of the things that you're holding on to that give you hope, that you're learning about the Son of God?
Well, I mean, one thing is certainly just the importance of resurrection. We know each other in this world as physical beings. We know like the sound of each other's voices, right? Like characteristic mannerisms, just we have sensory experiences, right? And if there were an afterlife and it were just purely mental, right, that would be something, but there would be deep dimensions of our humanness missing from that, right? And if you think about most religions in the world actually don't promise, they promise life after death, but they don't promise this, right? Like embodied life, right? That we will experience each other the way that we do now, right? So, I mean, if you have an understanding of reincarnation, then, it's sort of essentially be a different person. And if you did encounter your loved one in another incarnation, you'd be two different people, maybe with the same consciousness, right? But two different people encountering each other. Or if you just encounter each other as spirits, like the bodily aspect, that is what is part of what makes us, for biological families, I mean, that's part of what makes you family, right? Like,
you have to have a body to make it family.
It's also shared experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the vital importance of the resurrection, right, that Christ brings about for us is one thing. And just, I think, and again, just that in Christ, we are promised that things will be made new, right? That the world will be different, that his resurrection is first day of if it's the morning of the first day of the week, it's his resurrection. It's
eighth day, isn't it?
It's new creation.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's a new cycle of creation. And so the things the beautiful things from life we get to keep. Right? But the pain that we experience here, the illness, right? The things that bring so much pain in life are not the last word. They're not forever, right? That there is new creation coming for each of us as it came for Christ after his crucifixion, right? When at the moment that Christ died, it looked like the forces of evil had won, right? I mean, what did his disciples think? They thought he'd been crushed. They thought he'd been defeated, right? He told them, I'm going to rise again, but they didn't get it, right? They said, well, we thought he was the Messiah, but I guess we were wrong, They thought that the power of death, the power of evil, the power of Satan, the power of the violence of the empires of the world, right, that rule by force, right, the Roman Empire, right?
Yeah.
Christ was killed by the Roman Empire, right? I mean, it was a particularly Roman form of execution, torture and execution, the cross, right? That was ordered by Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, right, appointed by the Roman emperor, right? Christ was crushed. His body, his mortal body, was crushed by the big empire of the time, sort of the ruling empire in the world.
That's interesting, actually.
It looked like the powers of this world that rule by force, that rule by violence, that don't rule by justice or mercy, right? It looked like he was just a sort of backwater peasant in the Roman Empire, just been crushed by the empire, and then he overcomes, right? He's brought back. His body is created anew in a way that it will never suffer. It will never die. There's not going to be a second crucifixion, right? Like that ends, right? And Christ's resurrection is there's a technical term. It's prolepsis, right? It's like prolepsis is where something happens now that like portends a future, right?
Yes.
Christ's resurrection is the prolepsis of this future. It's the beginning. It's God's first act of this new creation, right? That shows us how things are going to be, that the forces of evil don't win, right? The forces of evil, the forces of injustice, the powers of darkness, death, they don't win. They didn't win for Christ. They didn't win over Christ. And because of that, They don't win over my son, right? They didn't win over God's son. They won't win over my son. They won't win over any of us. That's not the end of the story. And that's hope, right? Like we live with pain and loss now, right? But with the promise of what is to come.
I can't help but think of what we did, because you said this is the most insightful, the most foundational insight that you found. The man who is the Joseph Smithologist, who swims in Joseph Smith's history, that it's impossible to swim in that history without swimming in the truths of the restoration. And from the very beginning, the first revelation recorded, back to that Malachi, which is in all chapters, all books, by the way. It sounds like you're saying that again, that he is turning the hearts of the children to the fathers.
Right.
And then, but if it were not so, the earth would be utterly wasted at his coming. It's worthless. And I feel you say that in the way that you talk about your son. It's like, if I can't be with Donnie again, what's the point of this? If I can't be with Donnie again, what are we doing?
Right.
I don't,
Right. In the New Testament with Christ, I mean, Malachi is the last prophet who prophesied in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. So at the time that Christ came, people were expecting Malachi's prophecies to be fulfilled, right? He predicted the turning of the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers, predicted Elijah, or as in Greek, Elias, right? Well, John the Baptist fulfilled that role of being a sort of Elijah, right, for the coming of Christ, right, in the New Testament. Well, Christ is the Son. He's God's beloved Son. God declared this at Christ's baptism, right, that he was his beloved Son. His heart, the Father's heart, was turned completely to Christ. Christ's heart, he wanted only to do his Father's will. That's all he wanted to do. His heart was turned completely to the Father, right up to Gethsemane, his suffering in Gethsemane and on the cross, right? His heart is turned completely to the Father. There's that turning of the heart of the Father and the Son to each other there. And then in the restoration, we have this on on the divine level, right? In Christ, the Father and the Son. Then the Father and the Son come to Joseph Smith because he is seeking to save his father and his family, and by extension, others, right? He's seeking salvation for his family, and he has this built in from the time he's a child and cemented by the sacrifice he makes for his earthly father, right? He has this desire to serve him, this desire to save his family. He's chosen, I think, in good measure because of this, because of what that moment of sacrifice at his surgery showed about him, demonstrated about him, and also because of what it created in him, the self that sacrifice helped him to be, helped him to become. So the Father and the Son, in perfect alignment, again, come to him. He says they look like each other. The Father declares his beloved Son and says, hear him. Then the Son is declaring the truths of the Father, right, to Joseph Smith, whom he's addressing as his son, Joseph, my son.
And the identity, I think that's so powerful. Back to what you said before, right? That identity comes from the sacrifice.
Right.
And that's where the bond that they have together. Yes. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased.
Yeah. And parents will recognize this with their children, and the sacrifices you make for your children.
Yeah.
Your love for them grows because of that sacrifice, right? But that can go the other direction as well. It did for Joseph Smith Jr., the commitment that he had to his father because of the sacrifice he made for him. So then this is part of how he becomes who he is, how the restoration ends up happening through him. And the restoration, in good measure, is about turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers, right? Fulfilling that prophecy on another level and carrying that out to humankind.
This is so simple, but it's so deep, man. It's so deep. Like, that study that you showed is like an example of it. It almost feels like, oh, why would kids do that? Why would kids? I think that it's naturally in us. And that's how God is restoring humanity.
Right.
We want that. We want to help our parents, and our parents want to help us. For you right now, and you've mentioned a few things. How are you turning your heart back to your son? In what ways are you doing that? What does that look like for you?
Well, I'm going to get very personal, I guess. I wake up in the morning and I try to have my first thought of the day be a greeting to God, a thought of prayer and gratitude. And then I try to also feel, tune in to Donnie, to his presence. And I do a practice of loving kindness, where I think about Donnie and just all the love that I have for him and all the things that I wish for him, that I want for him, I desire for him, I hope for him, like his happiness, right? That he'd be happy. And I do that for my son, Nicholas. I do that for others, expanding out. And I do that for myself too, so that I can heal. And I spend time grieving while I'm doing that. I think I probably cry every single time. And I actively think about, I have a son on the other side of the veil. I have a son on this side of the veil. I actively think a great deal about how to be there for them. Obviously, Donnie went through so much suffering and he's had things taken from him that pain me greatly. I'm also pained that my other son has to go through so much pain in losing his brother. And I just, the way that you do as a parent, right? With your own father heart, right? You think about your kids all the time, And my heart on the most fundamental level is attuned to my children, right? And Donnie being physically absent from us doesn't change that in the slightest, right? I am very tuned into him. I want to do things that he fulfill hopes of his, right? And for things he wanted to achieve in his life that can still be achieved, for caring for others, like in our family that he loves too. And I know that he loves me. And so I have, whenever someone dies, we feel regret and we think about, maybe things I could have done differently. I've wrestled with a great deal of regret, and it's knowing Donnie's love for me, knowing Nicholas's love for me, knowing my mom's love for me, have been things that really have led me to overcome anger that I had at myself, right? Because that's not what they want from me. They don't want me to fall apart, in self-blame. And this has been a massive thing. And I'm being way more personal than I expected to be here, but I honestly went through genuine self-hatred after my son died, right? After Donnie died, I thought about things going back many, many years. What if I'd done this? What if I'd done that? Right? Things maybe to prevent his death, but also just to make his life better, in various ways. And I didn't want to myself to be happy. I didn't want myself to live. And I discovered something. I was at Donnie's grave one night, laying by his grave, and I was trying to direct some loving kindness to myself and the suffering I was going through, which had been really, had become sort of impossible for me to do because I had so much anger toward myself. And I had the thought, may Patricia's little boy, my mom, may Patricia's son be free from suffering. And that just opened the floodgates of my being able to have compassion for myself, because I realized that I am someone's son too, just like Donnie is mine, that she has cared for me the way I care for my son. And I learned, and I started realizing that my sons need me to take care of myself so I can do the things I want in this world for Donnie, and so I can be there and do the things I want for Nicholas too. And I came to understand something more about grace. Because I hated myself. I hated myself so much. But I realized that because of their love for me, I couldn't just let myself fall apart, disintegrate. I could. That even if I didn't feel love for myself at that point, I needed to give myself compassion for their sakes. And I never thought of grace like that before. But I thought of it that way now. And I have healed from all that toxic, terrible hate of myself because of their love for me. And so I'm growing tremendously in the wake of Donnie's passing. And that's actually not what I want. I don't want to be growing. I want Donnie here. But I don't get to make that choice right now. And so, given the way things are right now, I have the option of what am I going to do? How I handle my son's death is going to shape more than anything else who I become and how I live the rest of my life. It is.
There it is again.
It's the biggest thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah. There it is again, right? The sacrifice creates the identity.
This will shape who I will be. Right. Just like, young Joseph Smith made a choice, right? That shaped who he became. I have a choice, right? Who I will be by how I handle this. His choice had to do with his father, right? And his own suffering at that point. I have a choice in my suffering, right? Because of one of my sons and on behalf of both of my sons, right? I have a choice right now. And that choice shapes who I will be and what I will be able to do for them and what I will be able to do for God and for other people in this world. That choice shapes that future more than anything else in my life will. And I know what choice I'm going to make.
I'm just thinking about him. And if you were here now and he's listening to this, what do you want him to understand?
Donnie?
Yeah.
I think one of the great things I'd want to say to Donnie is thank you. Thank you for being my son. Thank you for your love and your depth, just how delightful you are. And, like Joseph Smith Sr. and Joseph Smith Jr., we're namesakes to one another. We share a name. And Donnie, I used to see you as sharing my name, and now I'm so proud to share yours. And I want to make you proud of what I do with our name and carry our legacy. Thank you, my beautiful son. My heart is turned to you as yours has always been turned to me. He and Nicholas are it's like the two great privileges of my life are two greatest gifts of my life are I get to be their dad. Even with Donnie's death, right? Like, no question about it, right? When Donnie was an infant, newborn, he was in the NICU, the newborn ICU, because he looked basically healthy, but then he immediately had a respiratory infection. He might not have made it, and it's because of the miracles of sort of modern medicine, modern technology. He lived for all the years that he did, and I'm devastated at what the years that were lost, the years ahead, right? But I'm also so grateful to God. I got to watch him blossom, right? And become who he has made himself in this world, and a person that I will, get to know further and watch him fully, thrive in the resurrection. And I'm grateful for how giving he's always been, for just the openness of his heart and his mind, like such depth of thought and feeling and soul, and the inspiration that he is to me, because Donnie had just like a lot of, he had, like I said, physical health problems. He had a lot of pain. He never complained. And he didn't call attention to it, went through a lot of emotional suffering as well. And that's your inspiration to me in that, Donnie. In bearing my own sufferings, I need to learn that, from the model that he provides, and just said I love him infinitely, and I'm not going to live my life as if he's not there. I'm going to live in anticipation of seeing him again. I'm going to do things for him, that he can appreciate, and fulfill hopes and dreams of his, and preserve all sorts of things, all sorts of aspects about him in this world, and anything that I can for him. In the gospel, we have this principle, particularly in the restoration, we have this principle that we can do things for those who have died, right? And if you think about it, there are a lot of religious people, and some religions include a kind of idea you can do things for the deceased. Catholics believe you can pray on behalf of the dead, right? People in the Baha'i faith, which has been part of my spiritual journey in the past, right? Like, believe that we can do good acts on behalf of the dead that will benefit their souls. Yeah. In the restoration, we have an idea instituted by Joseph Smith, right? Like through revelation, right? To do things for the dead in line with his, identity, right? Of saving the fathers, right? The ancestors, a family. We have this idea that we can do things on behalf of those who passed on. And yet, interestingly, we seem to not generalize that principle. We seem to, there's a principle there, but we seem to generally think of that principle only in its application to baptism, like a handful of ordinances: baptism, confirmation, ordination, endowment, marriage, maybe sealing to parents or children. Those are enormous things, right, that we can do on behalf of those who've passed on. But there's an underlying principle underneath those practices that we can do things for those who've passed on, right? We can, among, I think, the things that we can do, I think it's something we need to think more about.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's certainly something I'm thinking about personally is, what are the things I can do for those who pass on? Particularly, what are the things I can do for my son, Donnie? And what would that be, right? Like what would benefit him? Like, can we pray for people who are dead? Well, why not? Why couldn't we? But usually it seems like we don't.
Yeah.
I've heard people pray before for deceased family members who maybe hadn't accepted the gospel or something, that they would accept the gospel in the spirit world. So we obviously recognize that you can still pray for people who've passed on. There's why wouldn't you be able to?
This is interesting, yeah.
But yeah, like and like I mentioned earlier, I mean, something that I think most normal people, when they lost a loved one, they want to do at least some things that would fulfill wishes, hopes of those who have passed on. Maybe how can I extend that principle further? How can I extend that idea further for my son? And sort of what are the limits of what we can do for those who've passed on? Well, that's a great question. Right? One to consider and pursue.
Wow, that's deep, man. I think, yeah. I think this is one of. I think this has been so tender to me, man. I really mean it. It's been so tender. It's been so honest, and I think that it'll be very healing for people to know they're not alone for suffering that they face, whether it's people who have passed on or that are here. I kind of want to go full circle to Joseph Smith's story, right? Bring it full circle.
Yeah.
What do you wish that he would hear? What do you, if Joseph Smith were here to hear what you're explaining, what do you think, like, what do you hope that he heard of what we've said today?
Yeah, I mean, there's a curious thing about human beings where I think that in some ways we're all known intimately by other people, or hopefully like family members, loved ones, close friends. And yet sometimes I think there are things that are seen best through the lens of time, like with distance. And one interesting way that a historian is in a unique position is that Emma knew certain things about Joseph Smith that obviously we don't know. I mean, she knew him so closely, day to day, what kind of husband he was, what kind of father he was. Brigham Young knew Joseph Smith in certain ways, and we don't know. And they knew things like the sound of his voice, his mannerisms, things that we can't know right now, right? Oliver Cowdery knew him in certain ways. But we have records from all those people and many more. And so we have records of, I think, probably thousands of people who had interactions with Joseph Smith and patterns of his behavior across time. There are things that we can get from that sort of kaleidoscope vision, putting all those things together, that maybe people who knew him directly couldn't, right? And so there might be ways that a historian studying Joseph Smith can come to understand Joseph Smith, things that people couldn't see at the time. And something that I would hope that Joseph Smith would feel like listening to this is, I hope he would feel understood, right? That, because when he was 7 years old, I don't think he was explaining to his parents, if he even could have explained it at 7, Mom, I'm trying to kind of be the parent to you now. You need to be protected from seeing this. Dad, I need your comfort, but I also am trying to help you and set an example for you, right? And so did the people around him really fully understand what he was doing? Did they get him in all these ways? And if not, I hope that as a historian, one of the things that I hope to do is I hope to understand him the way he understood himself. And so I would hope that Joseph Smith, if he heard this now or when I meet him, will feel something I hope as a historian, as a human being, is that he'll feel understood. Like you got it. You understood what I was feeling. You understood what I was trying to do. That's my hope, right? And like looking at what he did as this child, you know, like just you were this beautiful, noble child, right? Like with such profound depths of love for your father. And, you know, you carried that further to try to serve your father further, and your heavenly father, right? And your family, your immediate family, your human family. And you had weaknesses, human, you know, aspects like we all do. And you're this larger than life figure with, you know, like, and so your strengths had an outsized impact, and you're put in a position where maybe sometimes your weaknesses could have an outsized impact, or get more attention called to them than other people's weaknesses would, right? But I see this nobility in you. I see these depths in you that I admire and that move me. And I admire what you did in your life and in the restoration. And I am a beneficiary of that, you know, as we are beneficiaries of that. And so thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. You shared some very, very intimate things. And I believe that they will help people. I believe that it will help be the catalyst to a lot of healing. And I believe that what you said is true. And as I always say, don't take our word for it. It's up to you to go to God and find out for yourself. This is Stephen Jones. This is Let's Get Real. Until next time.
So I talked about how Donnie is a poet, and he wrote a great many poems. He had a fantastic range in his poetry, from simple celebrations of beauty to complex explorations of the world and ideas and symbolism. And I found that after he died, that he had a manuscript that he wanted to publish of his poems called Light of an Hour. And so I'm going to be working to get that published, and also starting a website with his poetry and other writings and pictures and things at donniebradley.com. This first poem is a simple exploration of the beauty of nature. It's called Quiet Morning Sun. The bubbling of the rain against puddles, the rain falling against tin roofs as if it were rubble and pebbles, the rain roiling in the gutters. The commoners are shuttered into their houses as the real rabble of the world awakes. These blue-breasted and red-breasted birds, to whom in quiet morning hours the puddle is a lake and a ripple a breaking wave. Donnie also, like I said, he had complex explorations of things. He sometimes used much earlier poetry that he would allude to or riff on. He used concepts from science, and in this one he does both. This one's called The Feeling of a Freedom. And here he talks about how our hearts, he says, are like detuned facets of God. And I thought detuned facet must be some concept from music. It's actually from science. A detuned facet is a place that a laser strikes, where the surface that it's striking is not aligned with the laser. And so he's likening that to us. And he talks about the Rubaiyat. That's this great mystical poem. He talks also about, to understand the poem, he talks about ballast or ballast, which is something that holds something down. So like in a hot air balloon, the ballast or ballast holds the balloon down. So if when they let go of this ballast, then the balloon will rise higher. He likens that to us. Donnie experienced a lot of suffering in his life, and this poem is about letting go of suffering, and it's about finding freedom. The feeling of a freedom. Each facet of the heart is a detuned facet of God above, an infantile facet of God above, and each facet carouses on buses pretending to be nothing. There is something like a Rubaiyat to the world. Trust in this Rubaiyat. How the trusses of this flawless perfection are formed, where piecemeal breaks occur, not a perfect existence, but a perfection will emerge from everything still. God's unfaltered will is beyond the flagging of the individual feelings. Our pain abstains from healing. Our pain abstains from healing only for moments, which may happen, hours, decades, years. Then the moments pass. Our pain is just this strewn ballast. The heart, after many hours, turns free at last. Donnie, as I mentioned, he endured a lot of suffering. He also had tremendous compassion for other people's suffering. He told his brother Nicholas just months before he died how sad it made him to think that anyone in the world was sad. And when he was a child, one of the ways this manifested was he had a tremendous concern for other children around the world. He and also Nicholas used to collect at Halloween, not just candy for themselves, but they collected change for what's called Trick or Treat for UNICEF. So they would donate this change to the United Nations Children's Fund to help children around the world. When Donnie died, I actually found that he received in the mail, within maybe a week after he died, 3 letters from UNICEF showing that he had continued to support UNICEF in his adult life. So when he died, I started a GoFundMe for children through UNICEF, where the donations go directly to UNICEF. Maybe Stephen can post a link to that along with the video in Donnie's honor. This next poem, it's called Variations Upon Lorca. And here Donnie is dialoguing with another poet who was a young man who died young back in the 1930s, the Spanish poet Lorca. He was killed by the fascists. And Donnie mentions here the Sargasso Sea. And that is a sea. It's the only thing that we call a sea that isn't bounded by land. It's just bounded by other currents of the ocean. So it circles in on itself. And Donnie, in using this Sargasso Sea as a metaphor, he actually, as you'll see, he gets really playful here. Variations upon Lorca. Sargasso, because the man who thatches the walls between realities and metaphors has fallen asleep again.
I hear you whenever my hand covers my ears. It's like evidence that's growing in the cancer of ivy and roses.
Me in the Church of St. Peter, hearing in the turning of rapid Bible pages, wind and wild grass.
The rhythmic rustling of the pages, I am certain it is the panther of my dreams prowling.
Whether it prowls for me or against me, I do not know. This is an excerpt from one that he had called A Trance. And it has this theme of darkness and light and of hope. Universe, whoever it is who has met you knows your history, the truce of peace and misery, interweaving, a moment's pause, dawn and sunset interlocked, the darkness leaving, and new light entering. And on that same theme of darkness and light and hope, here is a line from Donnie's poem of Warmth, and I'll end with this. There is no darkness at all that is not touched by light.